Hey, Chad, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Where are you?
I didn't figure I'd be very popular today because I'm actually down in southern Florida.
Southern Florida.
Sunshine.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah, Fort Myers.
Get that sunscreen out, right?
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to find a place out of the wind. Is the feedback pretty bad?
I can hear a little feedback for sure.
Sure.
But
gosh, it's
well, you're lucky you're not outside here because it's raining. Cats and dogs.
Yeah. That's what I hear. So I didn't want to have to run around town to find a coffee shop to try to have a presentation at a coffee shop. But it's so stinking windy out here today that hopefully it doesn't.
It's not too bad. I think you're going to be
problems.
okay. Do you need to? I'm going to make you. Are you going to do a slideshow presentation?
I do have a slideshow.
Okay, so I just gave you permission to share screen. So if you want to just test it, or if you feel confident, you don't have to. We still have a few minutes. So
yeah, no, it'd probably be worth it for me to try to work out any of the kinks at this point.
We're gonna make it.
I think she got kicked off. The internet's a little slow. There we go. There's Megan.
Yeah, I had a little bit of a lag coming from you guys, I think.
Yeah, the internet with the wind going on right now, I don't know why, but the internet's been terrible in Joseph.
Yeah, sure.
So I started recording Rich.
Okay. Well, I'm going to start introducing. I'm going to do a very brief introduction, and we're going to hope a few more people come on. Chad Dodson works for the Nature Conservancy and manages their program for allotting landowner preference elk and deer tags to local charities and do good organizations and school groups and nonprofits and whatnot. And the Josephy Center was very pleased to have received a deer tag this year. And by the way, Chad, we're sold out. We sold them all.
That's great.
And the other group, that I'm associated with, and I told some of those folks to come on, the Rotary Club had a tag this year, and they chose to allow that. What's the magazine? The hunting magazine?
Yeah, Oregon Hunters Association.
So they got their money.
Good.
Now it says Yep. And now it says that I'm unstable. So Chad is, we all know him, so I don't have to do a longer introduction here. In the exchange, I just do have to say that his grandpa Max was one of the guys I moved to Wallowa County 50 years ago. One of the guys that introduced me to the county. And I always appreciated that. So take it away, Matt. Or
Oh, just one thing, Rich, you know, if your internet is not doing very well, take your camera off and the internet could speed up a little bit. Did you get that?
Yep. Go for it, Chad.
Okay, thanks, Rich. Looks like we got a couple more hopping on, like
Yeah, there's Jason.
Yeah, Justin.
Justin, yeah.
Yeah, so I'll start by pointing out the obvious that I am not in the same location that you folks are in today. If I get some wind feedback, let me know. I'll try to muffle that, but it's a little breezy down here in Fort Myers today, Fort Myers, Florida. So I'm a long ways from the Zoom wall. Yeah. So I think what I'm going to do is, gosh, I've got a little PowerPoint presentation here, but most of you pretty much already probably know the information that's on it. It would be more applicable to folks who aren't as familiar with the program. I can still run through it quickly, but I probably won't give the full version. And since it's a pretty small group, we can probably do more of a conversation than just me giving a presentation and you all waiting patiently. So yeah, I guess with that, if you have any questions throughout, feel free to shout them out or raise your hand or send a chat in the chat box. So yeah, with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and pull up this presentation here. Okay, can you guys see that? I can't see anyone's faces, so
yes.
I'm going to assume that we got it.
You got it.
Perfect. Okay, we're going to talk about the hunt program. So we'll start there. So the hunt program for TNC gives us several different opportunities, and these opportunities lead us to a few different pathways on how our program operates. So the first two big categories we have are basically our landowner preference. Sorry about the wind. Our landowner preference program and our antlerless elk hunting program. The two of those basically are the jump off point for what our program is all about. You guys are familiar with the LOP program because that's the opportunity that you have this year with the buck tag. So that one's the main fundraiser. That's the main one where most of the community engagement happens. And it's a pretty special opportunity for both the groups who receive the tag, the hunters who receive the opportunity to hunt, and TNC. It's just a good deal all the way around. The antlerless hunts are more based on land management strategies. We'll get into that a little bit. We do have youth hunting opportunities on the preserve, and then the shed antler collection program as well, which the Josephy Center had the opportunity to take part in 2 springs ago. You guys remember the date, probably 2018. I don't remember.
I think that's right.
so we can touch on that a little bit as well. Yeah, so our landowner preference hunt program, like Rich said in the beginning, that's an opportunity for TNC to be a part of the community, to give the opportunity for folks to raise some money for their program. Because of the resource on the preserve, these tags hold a pretty significant value. And that's what allows this thing to click. You know, if you have a good functioning ecosystem, you have the resource, you have the animals, the value is there, and the opportunity to give back is just a low-hanging fruit for us. The way that the system works is we solicit applications, and then we actually have a community volunteer panel that comes in, and they are the ones who go through the applications. They're the ones who decide ultimately where community funds are going to go. They're the ones who chooses the organization. So we provide the tag, but the community chooses where these funds are going to help in the community the most, which is really cool. It gives the chance for local folks to make those decisions that are going to have a huge impact on our community. Few stats here. The program started in 2002. It's still currently running. Over 90 tags have been donated in that amount of time, and it's generated over $600,000, which, like it says over there on the left, goes to local charities, conservation organizations. Yeah, just a pretty wide scope of opportunity from youth to, gosh, all sorts of groups have applied over the years. So it's a pretty cool deal. A few smiling faces there of the folks who have been successful over the years. A couple of those folks you may recognize, they're local, so that's always fun. That'll be the quick wrap up of the LOP program. Like I said, you can jump in anytime after we're done, open it up for questions, and we can hop back to any specifics if you have questions at that point. So our antlerless elk program is basically, like I said, a chance for us to use hunting as a land management tool. It's a chance for us to, allow folks to have a connection with the piece of property, like the Zoom wall. We can, tap into that social cultural connection that hunting brings to the land, right? If people are going to care about a place, they have to find ways to immerse themselves in it, and hunting is one of the oldest, most natural ways to do that. There's that connection between taking care of the places that take care of you, right? If you're getting a food source from an area, you're just really going to cherish it. So in giving that access to hunt antlerless elk on the preserve, we are able, this is just a chart that breaks down about how many hunters we have on the preserve each year, hunting elk. Now, these hunts are, take my hat off here. Put my hat on earlier so that my forehead wouldn't sunburn, but the sun's moving, so it might help you see my face. I won't be in such a shadow. Just gives you an idea about how many hunters are on the preserve a year. Things are changing a little bit. These tags are issued through ODF and W. We give permission once tags have been distributed by ODF and W. We are not giving the antlerless elk tags away. They have to be drawn through the state draw, just like any other tag that you might get through the state. So I want to make that clear. It's a little bit different than the LOP program. But gosh, so as most of you probably know, for the last decade or more, there's been some pretty large numbers of elk that use the Zumwalt, and we're having effects on a lot of the native plants and some of the animals that use those plants. They were wreaking havoc on aspen stands like the one you see here. Basically, without fencing, most of the aspen stands on the preserve were being damaged a little bit by cattle. There are some browse from other ungulates like mule deer, but mostly by elk. So the antlerless elk hunts allow us to change some of that population in terms of numbers of elk. They help us in terms of distribution, how long those elk spend in one area. They get moved around by hunters, and so they're not having as dramatic an impact in one particular area. The hunting opportunity gives us some legitimacy with other hunting conservation organizations like Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, Teddy Roosevelt Conservation Partnership, Oregon Hunters Association. And the cool thing about this is a lot of those groups are campaigning on Capitol Hill for the same things that we are, right? Clean air, clean water, preserving and protecting these wild places and wild critters. So these partnerships are super important, for us as an organization, but also, just us as humans doing good by the environment. So the hunt program has really helped us in that way as well. We have a non-lead ammunition partnership and incentive program with ODFW and the Oregon Zoo. We're collecting data and providing incentives for hunters to use non-lead, which is a pretty big deal if we're talking scavenging animals, mostly birds, from lead poisoning and lead poisoning effects. And like I said earlier, then it just gives us that social cultural connection to the land and the critters who call it home out there. So Mike is on. He can answer questions if you I'll turn the presentation over to Mike at this point because there's a cow on the screen. No, but cattle are a big part of what happened out there on the Zumwalt. It's a big part of our culture and history as Wallow County folks and farmers and ranchers, and so finding that sweet spot on how we can have productive cattle grazing operations and also have elk on the landscape, and make sure that all that is in balance and working together, and keeping the ground productive is important. So that's a huge connection for us with the elk management as well, is how that ties into cattle management on the Zumwalt preserve, but the Zumwalt as a whole with our neighbors and partners. We'll hop over to the youth department. We give permission to 2 youth bull elk hunters per year. And we like to keep those opportunities local when we get kids who sign up. We, in the last year or 2, have started giving out opportunities for turkey. Had a couple local boys have success on some turkey hunts. So that's pretty awesome. If you guys know interested youths in the county who want an opportunity, send them our way. Shed antler program. Yeah, it's been going for quite a while now. I started, like Rich said, I was guiding before I worked full-time for TNC. I started guiding in 2013, and there had been an antler program before that. It had lost a little bit of steam and just needed a pick-me-up. So we collectively got together and really pushed the shed antler sled down the hill, if you will, and since then it's been pretty successful. gives us a chance again to just get people out on the preserve. You folks at Josephy were out a couple years back and know that it's a good time hiking around out there looking for antlers, and and at the end of the day, the money's helpful as well. So hopefully we can continue to do that. Some kiddos that were having fun. Yeah, so looking forward to the future. Wildlife management is never static. There's always things that are changing. The environment's changing. The predator prey interactions are changing. The way humans use and utilize the resource is changing. So we're always looking ahead and trying to determine as best we can what it's going to look like. But part of the reality of wildlife management is it's pretty retroactive. We're making decisions based on assumptions, and then we got to look back and say, hey, did that work? Does that work based on the trends that we're projecting in the future? I know that TNC, as long as we have a resource and feel like it's an appropriate resource to let hunters and gatherers out on the preserve, I can pretty confidently say that we're going to continue to do that. For all the reasons that we just talked about, why we think it's important to have hunters on the landscape. But again, it just depends on the resource and what what happens here in the next 2 years, 5 years, and 10 years. But hopefully hunters will continue to be a big part of our engagement plan out in the Zoom wall. So yeah, I guess that's it's picking up a little bit. Hopefully I don't get conked on the head with coconut or something. You're probably all hoping that I do. So yeah, okay. With that, open it up to questions.
Looks like Jeff got on with this.
Have any?
He did. Yeah, did you see my question on there, Chad? What are your ideal number ranges for deer, elk, cougar, whatever, and cattle, and where are they now in relation to? I know that varies from year to year and whether
Yeah, so a lot of those numbers, Rich, are ultimately determined by ODF and W. Right? I mean, the Zumwalt Preserve is a big chunk of ground at 33,000 acres, but when you start talking holistically and across the Zumwalt and then across, say the greater Chesnimnus area, it's not really that big of an area. All those critters come and go, and so we have an idea of what we would like it to look like on the preserve in terms of one of our big indicators is impact on resources like grass and native shrubs and aspens, but we don't really set hard numbers. That's all done through ODF and W, and there are in the spring normally there's a landowner cohort meeting that ODF and W hosts where we all get together and talk about management strategies and an estimated number for the Zumwalt as a whole and the Chestnut unit as a whole. So for some of those specific numbers, we could check with ODF and W, and I could send that out in an email. I don't remember them off the top of my head.
Hey, Chad, can you talk a little bit about that stakeholder group, Zumwalt elk landowner stakeholder group, and kind of the history of how the Nature Conservancy and the landowners partnered with ODF and W to manage the elk population and the concerns around the number of elk on the Zumwalt and their impacts to private rangeland?
Yeah. So the very, very short and simple version, and a lot of this history that I get has been passed down from ranchers out there and hunters and folks who spent time out there, say in the early 80s and 90s. The elk didn't really call the Zumwalt Prairie home like they do now. They had been pushed out on the national forest. There was a small elk herd that bounced around on the prairie itself, but it wasn't what we know of today. And then as time went on and hunting seasons and structures changed, the majority of the Zumwalt is privately owned. And so a lot of those elk from the national forest that were getting pressured were pushed back onto the private ground, which is the Zumwalt Prairie. Over time, they found that it was a pretty good place to make a living. And so their numbers grew. And then, excuse me, if you can imagine, you know, a calf elk that's born and lives on the Zumwalt Prairie its whole life, you know, they don't look across at the Seven Devils and think, man, let's go hang out over there for a while. They grow up on the preserve or on the prairie, and that's where they live. So pretty soon there was a lot of elk out there. And we're talking, I think it peaked around Justin, 4,000 to 5,000 head that were calling the prairie and or nearby regions home for the majority of the year, and it was having a pretty significant impact on the bunch grass and on the native plants and animals. And you know, once that starts to happen and resources are under that degree of competition, it starts to affect folks who are trying to make a living out there, and namely the ranchers running cattle. So we had problems with fencing, you know, fences destruction, and then just resource damage. At that point, there was a group formed of landowners, agencies like ODF&W, ranchers, basically anyone who had stock in the Zumwalt Prairie. They all got together and said, hey, we have a management issue here. What can we do about it? And so at the time, it was still Vic Coggins and Pat Matthews kind of got the ball rolling, and they did a little bit of a unique management strategy for the Zumwalt, in which they gave a bunch of tags and really decided that they were going to, well, originally, I guess I should step back. Originally, they were going to try an elk hazing program, which I was a part of for a year or two. And the thought there was they were going to try to haze the elk back out onto the national forest. But like I said earlier, you know, if you can imagine it, you're an elk calf that was born on the prairie, you don't know the difference. It's pretty hard. They'll just run circles around you. It's like herding cats, big cats. So the hazing program was scrapped pretty early on, and it went to a hunting program. ODF&W said, hey, we're willing to work with the ranchers. We're willing to give more tags to try to lower the population. In turn, your ranchers have to provide public access. You got to let people hunt. We're not going to give a bunch of tags if you're not willing to let people onto your property to hunt elk. It's not going to work that way. And so over time, and the numbers show this, it's been successful. The numbers are back down to an appropriate level. And actually at last year's landowner meeting, both sides, ODF&W and the ranchers were both pretty happy with the number of elk on the preserve. ODF&W was a little bit worried about their management objective numbers across the greater Chesanim, worried in the fact that the programs work pretty well and those numbers are low. There's a lot of factors that also play into the number of elk on the national forest we won't get into yet. But in end story is they are going to start to reduce the number of seasons and the number of tags on the Zumwalt, which was the goal in the first place, right? The program was never intended to last forever. It was meant to get these elk herds back down to a manageable number, and then figure out how to maintain that in a way that's healthy for the animals and the ranchers and everyone involved. So I think we're getting real close to being at that happy medium.
Hey, Chad, this is Cheryl. The Josephy Center got a buck tag. So I'm kind of curious about what the numbers are like for the buck, for the deer.
Yeah.
You talked a lot about the elk, and
Yep.
the winners of the tag drawing. What is that? What is the time that they're brought out to do the actual hunt?
Yeah,
Those are
no, that's a
my
great
only
question.
questions.
No, those are good questions because we didn't touch on mule deer much. Mule deer are an iconic animal of the West. We have in Oregon, but across the West, as a whole, mule deer numbers have been slightly on the decline. On the preserve, I would say in the last few years, we're seeing a few more deer. Definitely stable in terms of a huntable population. And it's another great opportunity for us to give folks to come out and enjoy the preserve. So while the mule deer don't have quite the impact on ranching and native vegetation that the elk do, it's still a great chance for hunting and for education and for a fundraiser. So we do 2 deer tags a year versus the 4 LOP bull tags. There are no antlerless deer hunts out there. The buck seasons all align with the ODF&W predetermined dates that they would have for the chestnut unit. We have a hunting guide who's contracted to run the hunts that are out on the preserve. His name's Tyler Hauk. He does a great job for us. He's super knowledgeable in terms of hunting and does a great job with the folks who come out, but also just a great person, a great steward, a great representative for TNC. It's a really awesome experience for people overall. So the timing on those hunts is normally like the first week of October-ish for the deer. The elk, there's one season at the end of October and one season at like the first week of November. So that's usually when those hunts take place.
Okay, and I don't mean, I keep typing things and other people are typing things in the chat.
Yeah, and I apologize because I'm not very good at checking the chat. So
That's all right.
definitely shout out if.
So
Yeah.
You got some questions about turkeys there.
Yeah, there's turkeys. What opportunities are there for kids, and how can you get involved in the Shed Antler program? And I thought I heard you say that there wasn't going to be an antler program for 2021. So maybe you can expound on that.
Sure. So, yep, I see that we've got a turkey question from Mark. Thanks, Mark. We do. We like to try to give priority to local youth. But if we have enough applicants, then we'll usually do one opportunity for local and one opportunity for folks outside of Wallowa County. Vice versa, if we don't have anyone locally sign up, then we'll pass those opportunities on to folks outside the county as well. The turkey hunts are not guided, but they essentially just have permission to access the preserve for a set amount of time, predetermined. Usually I'm the contact there. So folks, would reach out to me, get their kids signed up, then we would have a drawing for permission. And if they're drawn, then we would just arrange dates that the youths would be able to come out and hunt turkeys on the preserve. So that's normally how the turkeys work. Gosh, I'm not used to talking so much. My throat's dry now. COVID obviously has affected the way we can operate, just as it has many of you. one of the ways that it has done that is it's going to affect the shed antler program this spring. We are not having a shed antler search this year. We have staff members that are doing work on the preserve. We have contractors that come and go. Those antlers will still be gathered, and the hope is that they will be put in the pile, and we will solicit applications for 2022. At that point, we're hoping that this COVID stuff is behind us and we can get back to work. So the antlers aren't going to go to waste. We're not at a position as an organization this spring to be able to host folks on the preserve in groups like that. So that's what we've got going on for shed antler this year.
Chad, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I think you had 2 summers ago, you had a bunch of Indian root gatherers go out on the preserve, didn't you?
That would actually be Justin's expertise. Would be the call him out.
I was wondering along with that, Indians of course have hunting rights here. Are there special accommodations or anything done with tribal hunters on the preserve?
Rich, it's a really interesting question. Go. You want to answer that?
No, go for it.
It's an interesting question. What you run into, well, first of all, just to address the root gathering, that was this past year that we had plans to have root gathering events because of COVID's impact. Really, actually, folks just decided it wasn't the right thing to all come out. But we're just now starting conversation again about this year with the hopes to start doing some scouting trips starting in April and then have root gathering events should everyone feel comfortable throughout the summer. TNC would be able to facilitate to host that. We could open the preserve for that event. As far as big game and treaty rights, this stuff is moving through the courts because big game is the quote unquote property of the state, and the state of Oregon has different legal ramifications of the treaties than the federal government, and so that it's a complex issue that we've started to look into a little bit, and I think there are ongoing court cases. One that was recently prompted by the harvest of the bighorn sheep, down by the Wanaha, as well as others. But we don't at this point have the opportunity to allow treaty right harvest of game animals, unless of course if a tribal member had a tag issued through the state of Oregon.
Right.
Yeah, that's a separate issue.
So tribal hunting rights are basically on federal land.
Correct.
Right?
Doesn't pertain to private land.
Right.
In the same way, right? I mean, I think there are some legal questions that are still being decided.
Good.
Great. Thanks, Justin.
So, well, if nobody else is going to speak up, I'll ask another one. The hunts on the landowner preference hunts, the tags that you allow us to raffle off, how are the guides set up? Is that some kind of a rotating basis, or do you pick by lottery, or do we know at what point does the hunter know? Does the hunter get a choice? How does that work?
Yep. So the guide is Tyler Houck. He's been contracted with us for the past several years, and he does a great job. So we continue to want to keep working with him. So yeah, we know who the guide's going to be. If once a hunter is drawn, say from your organization, TNC will need some of their information to be able to turn into ODF&W to get their tag lined up for them. But then at that point, most of the details and the communication are going to go through Tyler.
Okay.
In terms of specific dates, what to bring, what accommodations are going to be available to the hunters, any other animal type questions they're going to have pertaining to the hunt. That's all going to go through Tyler for the most part. I'm available as a resource as well, but Tyler's going to be the lead at that point. Each of the hunts are 3-day hunts. I don't know if anybody asked that. You guys probably all know that. Yeah. Yep. So that's the guide situation at this point, Rich.
Okay. Good clarification. Thank you.
Yep.
We must be all real smart and we might know it all. Well, here, I'll throw out another one. So what about wolves and cougars out there? Somebody told me one time that in the balance of nature, the wolves harass the elk on the prairie, and the cougars get them in the trees. And when you take away one of the two, they all go the other direction. Is that true?
I suppose it depends on the elk and depends on the day. Yeah, I'm not gonna sit here and pretend to be Shane Talley with ODF&W. He'd probably have some real good answers for you. I will say that we do have wolves that go through the preserve. We have lions that are definitely residents on the preserve. Both of them like to eat elk and deer because that's what they're made to do. I think that they have definitely some effect on distribution. But I don't know that we've seen dramatic changes in elk behavior or dramatic changes in elk numbers that you could draw any correlation to, wolves or cougars specifically. We know that they eat them. We know that they, take quite a few throughout the course of the year, but the wolves are very nomadic. They're always kind of on the move, and it's not like we haven't seen situations where a pack will come out to the preserve and stay there for any extended amount of time. They might be there for a few days or a week or something, and then they're going again. So yeah, it definitely they have effect on elk and elk numbers, but certainly not to the point, at least, where it's dramatically affecting our management decisions, or ODF&W's management decisions based on the wolves or the cougars. Cougars can have a pretty substantial impact on mule deer. I've talked to a lot of biologists because you hear it thrown around pretty often that a mature cougar will eat a deer a week on average. I've asked a lot of those folks if that number is pretty accurate, and most of them tend to agree that it is. But on the preserve, we get a lot of cougars who are hunting elk almost primarily. Now, part of that is, I think, there's just a lot of elk out there, so it makes for an opportunity that they have. And I think that cougars predate on elk just a lot more than folks think in general. So they're very efficient hunters and they're good at it. So yeah, I don't know if that helps your question any, Rich.
Are the cougar numbers pretty stable now there then?
It's so hard to say. It's so hard to survey for cougars. We have trail cameras set out and we catch them all the time on trail cameras, I think that the numbers are certainly stable, if not, slightly increasing. ODF&W numbers across the state have seen dramatic increases in cougar numbers since folks weren't allowed to use dogs, hound hunting for cougars and bears. And they've done some studies, and there's direct correlations there in terms of deer numbers and mule deer numbers. What did I say? Cougar numbers and mule deer numbers. So in terms of, do we know exactly how many cougars are on the preserve at any time? No, we don't. But we do see a lot of sign, and we do catch them on trail cameras, and every great while you see one, while you're out working or something. But yeah, that's a really, really difficult number to put a handle on.
And you mentioned bear. Do you have bear hunters on the preserve as well?
Nope, no bear hunters. There's a really strong bear population on the preserve. Bears are doing well. And it's kind of the nature of large predators to self-regulate to a certain extent. We don't need to get really into the biology, but they're all fairly territorial, and big males will protect their territories, and so they just naturally kind of distribute accordingly. So you don't get super high concentrations of predators normally. And like I said, 33,000 acres is a big chunk of ground, but when we're talking, animals who can cover it in a matter of an hour, it gets small pretty quick. So yeah, I think predator numbers are certainly stable out there, and they certainly do have impacts on the game and distribution, but again, it's really, really hard to measure that without having a sit down specific study aimed at it. And we just don't have something like that set up right now.
Well, there I got a little bit smarter. Why don't you allow bear hunting?
No, that's a good question. I think that we could definitely make a formal argument for some predator hunting. But it would have to be all science-based. We would have to have a good hard science and good hard numbers that say another species or some amount of management is being impacted from the fact that there are too many bears, say, on the preserve. I think that there is still that social cultural hunting aspect that's important, and there's an angle there as well, but for right now, there's not enough science, not enough data on our preserve to warrant predator hunting, predator control for the sake of predator control.
Yeah, I might jump in with the really boring administrator answer too, right?
Perfect.
Which is just that, these opportunities are really, wonderful. We feel really, really good about them, but they're not free. We have a strong wildlife management motivation for our antlerless elk hunts, but we also have a substantial budget line that goes along with that, and it's money well spent for our conservation mission. The LOP tag is a wonderful thing for engagement and for community, but it also comes at a cost to the Nature Conservancy. So anytime we consider one of these opportunities, whether it be for wildlife management, conservation management, or for that public engagement aspect, it's always a cost benefit analysis. And bear hunting, just hasn't weighed out. We haven't seen the opportunity to justify the cost yet.
Bears are hunted on nearby Forest Service land, right? On public land?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm not a hunter, so is there still even without dogs, is there still some cougar hunting or not?
There is. Yep. You can still buy a cougar tag, and it's, almost primarily opportunistic at that point.
Okay.
You have to have a tag in your pocket and happen to see a cougar while you're out. So the success rates on harvest, it has just decreased dramatically.
Yeah. Well, Chad, or you have anything more to wrap it up, or Justin, you want to jump in with anything else? Or I guess Mike's on there as a cooperating private landowner. He might want to say something too.
Well, and I'm not gonna call him out, but I kind of am. If you guys had specific questions with how the grazing management strategies for cattle play into this, it might be your chance to ask Hale. I can't see his face at the moment, so he might be scowling at me. But like I said earlier, cattle management and ungulate management, wildlife management go hand in hand out there. So he would definitely be the expert.
So you're
You got
forcing
anything to say, Mike?
you're forcing my hand.
A little bit.
Well, my approach, and I think in line with our conservation values, is to manage the grasslands for a generous margin of surplus between the health of the and fertility of the land and then our demands on it. So as we put livestock on the resources for a commercial benefit and cultural benefit, we manage them at a low to moderate stocking rate, recognizing that we're sharing the resources with lots of other animals. And the main competitor to livestock would be elk, which would be another large ungulate, another big herbivore out there. So I've always had an interest with elk numbers and how they interact with cattle. And there's been a body of research, a lot of the research from Dennis Sheehy and John Scovlin that looked at the relationship between elk, herbivory, and livestock, mostly in Northeast Oregon. So I'm aware of those interactions and the needs to maintain that surplus just so we have a pretty big cushion. And I'm looking at not running out of grass in any one pasture. We're not grazing intensively and wanting to remove a lot of forage because we know there's free roaming and ranging elk out there. And we have looked at increasing our research on elk habitat selection, and we'd still like to do that in the future, but that's kind of on hold right now. If we had a better handle on elk movement and behavior, then, and what I use when I'm scheduling livestock grazing for the season. So we, through our combined knowledge and experience, we have pretty good understanding of elk behavior out there, and I incorporate that when I'm planning for the upcoming grazing season. But certainly appreciate that we're managing a semi-wild landscape. It's kind of borderline cultural landscape because people have been out there for a long time. And we have big pastures that are fenced. So, fences are probably the biggest hindrance or impediment and danger to the wild ungulates on the prairie. So we try to make all of our fences wildlife friendly with lots of elk crossings. And anytime I build a new fence or have it contracted, I do a very minimal structure that is easily passed by wildlife. And just to manage very conservatively. And I think our last season, we currently have 5 families, at least from the Nature Conservancy, from yearling cattle to cows and calves. So we have a combined kind of class of livestock out there. And we try to keep them pretty short duration grazing during the growing season, and then we extend the grazing events later in the season and into the fall. So we have cattle out there. We have cattle in the canyons that come onto the preserve the middle or by the 1st of April. And those cattle migrate from the canyons to summer pasture in the uplands. And we have cattle laid on the preserve into the 1st of November generally. A few head out there for late season grazing. And then during the elk season, during the hunting season, we post all the pastures that have cattle in them, so the hunters are aware and they're not allowed to hunt in the pastures that have cattle. And we haven't had too many troubles, any problem interactions between hunting and livestock grazing. So I think it's been a good blend of management. And they're the 2 income producing strategies we have on the Zumwalt right now.
Yeah, thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Mike.
And then just to point out that Jeff Fields and Mike Beachy from TNC are on today as well. You know, and when you're talking about wildlife management, it's never, gosh, it's always just such a big picture question, right? There's so many variables, and thinking about, while I was listening to Mike talk about cattle, I was thinking about Beachy and Mike Beachy and noxious weed control and what that does for elk habitat, deer habitat, and how it improves the grazing as well for cattle, and you know, all the work that he does in the noxious weed world. So it's, gosh, it's, you know, it's just a huge equation. It takes a lot of folks with a lot of drive, and you know, you just want to do good by the place. So thanks to those guys.
Well, thank you all. And Chad, we'll try to send some more groups and people your way. And Cheryl has recorded this, so people like my friend Rick Bombasi can watch it tomorrow and pick up some of the information. And we'll encourage them to call you once you get back from paradise there, or whatever the heck you call that place.
Yeah. If I decide I like it that much, I might be talking about gator management next year instead of elk management.
Yeah.
Thank you,
There's
Chad.
a lot of swampland down there.
Thank you, Cheryl.
There's a lot of swampland. I don't know. You might get caught in it. Better watch out.
Yeah. I don't know. It's been nice so far, but I don't know if I'd make it without a mountain in sight. So, okay. Well, with that, I appreciate you guys having me on to talk about that, and happy to hear that you had such great success selling buck raffle tickets.
We actually oversold a few tickets, so we might get in a little trouble.
Were you able to pull a winner yet?
No, we're going to do that. We're going to do it on Facebook Live on March 16th.
Okay.
So we're going to do it then. And we wrote an email to all the people that purchased tickets. And we told people, we said, look, we actually oversold. We are willing to give anybody a refund, and no one wanted a refund.
Well, that's great.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess we'll just have to pay the tax consequences or whatever happens. We'll be prepared with what's going to happen.
Well, be interested to follow along with that, just so.
Yeah, it wasn't by much. I think we sold like I think we sold like 62 tickets and we were supposed to sell 50.
Sure.
So yeah.
Sure.
Anyway, thank you so much, Chad. I really appreciated learning more about it. And it's just been fun. And we're so appreciative that we were able to do it. It's actually been really fun. And the whole raffle thing, I thought it was going to be really arduous. And so far it's been pretty easy. So thank you so much.
Good. Yeah. Thanks to you guys as well. And we'll catch up with you guys when you pull a winner.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Okay.
Safe
Thanks.
travel home.
Enjoy
Thank you.
Florida.
Thanks, everyone.
Looks
Will do.
gorgeous there.
Yeah. Thank you guys. Have a good day.